Hi, this is Charles Kaplan. I'm a retired college professor. I taught economics and applied math. And today we're working on factoring with the quadratic formula. So here's the quadratic formula. It is x is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac divided by 2a. Now this is what we're finding are the values of x where the graph intercepts the x-axis. Now, these are quadratic formulas, so we know that the equations are going to be parabolas. They're going to look, say, something like that. In which case, this point and this point, those 2 points are the points we're looking for, the points where the x-axis cuts where the graph cuts the x-axis. I'm also going to show you how to find that point, the vertex. All right, it could be there, it could be here, all right, but that point is the vertex. Another important point. So let's get going here. Let's start with, let's get an appropriate problem. How about 9x squared minus 18x plus 3 equals 0. Okay. So the first thing we're going to do, remember, is our equations are set up as ax squared plus bx plus c. So in this case, a equals 9, b equals negative 18, and c equals 3. So if we use our quadratic formula, which is negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a, and I always write this formula out every time I go to do a problem or have to factor using a quadratic. I write out the quadratic equation formula. Keeps it fresh in my mind, easier to remember, and you should definitely be doing that all the time. So let's start plugging in values here and see what we come up with. Negative b would be negative 18, which is positive 18, plus or minus the square root of, well, let's see, 18 squared, I happen to know that is 324. So 324, yeah, I think it's 324, minus 4 times 9 times 3 all over 2 times 9. So let's see. Nine times 4 times 3. Well, let's see. 4 times 3 is 12, and if you remember your 12 times tables, 12 times 9 is 108. So we get 18 plus or minus the square root of 324 minus 108 all over 18. And that's going to give us 18 plus or minus the square root of, well, let's see, if I do 324 minus 108, 14 minus 8 is 6. 216 all over 18. Right? Is that right? I think it is. So let's see. So that's going to give us 18 plus or minus, well, 216 is 36 times 6. So square root of 216 is the square root of 36 times the square root of 6, which is equal to 6 times the square root of 6. So 18 plus or minus 6 times the square root of 6 all over 18. Now, I believe we can factor out a 6 here. So if we factor out 6, we get 6 times 3 plus or minus the square root of 6 all over 18. So if we cancel that and we cancel that, we wind up with 3 in the denominator. So that's going to give us, let's see, 3 plus or minus the square root of 6 over 3. Right? Did I do that right? Well, we could also do this as, we could cancel this, and we'd wind up with 1 plus or minus the square root of 6 over 3. That's one way we could do it. And we could do it as 3 plus or minus the square root of 6 over 3. Now, let's find the vertex on this thing. So, let's see what this graph is going to look like. I think that might be kind of interesting to do. So we're going to have a graph. And actually, let me just make some quick calculations here. Okay. So, if we use x equals 1 plus or minus the square root of 6 over 3, all right, x is going to be approximately equal to 1.82, and x will be approximately equal to 0.18. So this graph is going to cut here around 0.18 and up here at about 1.82. And our original equation was 9x squared minus 18x plus 3. And if we do, let's go back down here, negative b over 2a, we're going to get 18 over 18. So x is going to be equal to 1. This is going to cut right around here at 1. It's going to cut, the vertex is going to be at x equals 1. And the question is, at what point does it hit down here? What's its y value where it hits? So we're going to plug 1 back into the original equation. So we get 9 times 1 squared minus 18 times 1 plus 3. And that gives us 9 minus 18 plus 3. That would be, let's see, negative 9 plus 3 is negative 6. So negative 6. So right here, so this graph is going to look like so. It's negative 6 down here, 1 here, that's your vertex. 1 comma negative 6 is the vertex. and it's crossing the x-axis at approximately 0.18 and 1.82. So that's what this graph looks like. Let's do another. Okay, let's see what we've got here. How about x squared minus 4x minus 8? X squared minus 4x minus 8 equals 0. So we know that A equals 1, B equals -4, C equals -8, and our quadratic formula is -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So -b would be -4, which would be 4, plus or minus the square root of, well, -4 squared is 16, minus 4 times 1 times -8, all over 2 times 1. So that's going to give us 4 plus or minus the square root of 16. Well, we're going to have 8 times 4 is 32, -32. So minus -32 is plus 32, all over 2. Let's see, we have 4 plus or minus the square root of 16 plus 32 is 48, all over 2. And 48 is 16 times 3. So the square root of 48 is equal to the square root of 16 times the square root of 3, which is equal to 4 times the square root of 3. So we get 4 plus or minus 4 times the square root of 3 all over 2. And we can factor out a 2 from the numerator. So we get 2 times 2 plus or minus 2 times the square root of 3 all over 2. The 2's cancel. We're left with 2 plus or minus 2 square root of 3. So our x values are going to be x is equal to 2 plus 2 root 3, and x is equal to 2 minus 2 square root of 3. Now, this is approximately 5.46, and this is approximately -1.46 if you were to do the arithmetic there. Let's see what this graph looks like. So our equation once again is x squared minus 4x minus 8 equals 0. And we want to see what this graph is going to look like. And we know that our 2x intercepts are approximately -1.46 and approximately 5.46, which should be 2 plus or minus 2 times the square root of 3. This being 2 minus 2 root 3, this being 2 plus 2 root 3. And this is going to be a happy-faced parabola. So we want to see where it is that this graph is going to form a vertex. So we're going to take -b over 2a, which should be -4, which should be 4 over 2, which is 2. And if we plug 2 back into the original equation, we get 2 squared minus 4 times 2 minus 8, which would be 4 minus 8 minus 8, which should be negative 4 minus 8, which should be negative 4. 4 minus 8 is, what did I do here? I think I made a mistake. Maybe I didn't. Minus 8 and minus 8 is minus 16, plus 4 is minus 12. So the vertex is going to be at 2 comma negative 12. So 2 negative 12. So it's going to look something like that. Again, I apologize for my drawing skills. They're non-existent. I'm just bad at it. Okay. Let's look at another problem. Let's see, what have I got here? How about 4x squared minus 4x minus 99 equals 0. Well, I bet you weren't expecting that. So, we know that A equals 4, B equals negative 4, and C equals negative 99. And our quadratic formula is negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So negative b would be negative 4, which would be positive 4, plus or minus the square root of, well, negative 4 squared is 16, minus 4 times negative 99, all over 2 times 4. Wow. So we've got 4 plus or minus the square root of 16. And then we're going to have minus and minus, so it is going to be a plus. 1,584 all over 8. Which is going to give us 4 plus or minus the square root of 1,600, which is quite easy, over 8. Well, the square root of 1,600 is 40. So we have 4 plus or minus 40 all over 8. All right, so let's see. This is going to give us, well, 4 plus 40 is 44 over 8. And 4 minus 40 is going to give us negative 36 over 8, I believe. Let's see, negative 44 over 8 reduces down to 11 halves. And negative 36 over 8 reduces down to negative 9 halves. So we have our two x values. Let's take a look at what this graph looks like. So let me copy the equation here, 4x squared minus 4x minus 99 equals 0. Now, 9/2 is approximately, well, not approximately, it's 4.5, and 11/2 is 5.5. And so, let's see, we've got negative, x equals negative 9/2, and x equals 11/2. So this is negative 4.5, and this is equal to 5.5. So we have negative 4.5 and 5.5. Let's see what that's going to be. Let's find the vertex. So the vertex is going to be negative b over 2a. So that's negative b would be 4 over 8 is 1/2. And if we plug 1/2 in, that would be, let's see, 4 times a half squared minus 4 times a half minus 99. That'd be 4 times a quarter minus 2 minus 99. We've got 1 minus 2 minus 99 is negative 100. So the vertex is 1/2 negative 100. So that point is 1/2 negative 100. That's where the vertex is. This is where it crosses the x-axis. That's what your graph looks like, folks. Not particularly difficult. In fact, it's rather easy. Let's look at another. So let's see what we have here. Okay. We've got x squared plus 6x minus 7 equals 0. So A equals 1, B equals 6, and C equals negative 7. Now, I just want to talk briefly, that last problem where you had negative 99 in there, it looked like it was going to be a huge, difficult problem, and it turned out to be a nothing little problem, because when we worked it out, we wound up with negative 16, with 1600 under the radical. Square root of 1600 made it easy at 40. So a lot of times you look at these problems and say, oh my goodness, this is going to be difficult. But it turns out that they're not that hard. So don't sweat it. These things are often solvable. In real life, they're often difficult to solve, but in the textbook problems, they're relatively easy. So we have negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. So negative b would be negative 6 plus or minus the square root of, well, 6 squared is 36 minus 4 times 1, and c is negative 7, all over 2a, 2 times 1. So we have negative 6 plus or minus the square root of 36. Let's see, negative 7 times 4 is negative 28. So 36 minus negative 28 is 36 plus 28. And I believe 36 plus 28, well, let's write it out here, all over 2. And that's going to give us negative 6 plus or minus the square root of 64. That makes things easy. Over 2. So we've got negative 6 plus or minus 8 all over 2. So we've got, let's see, negative 6 plus 8 is 2 over 2, which is 1. And negative 6 minus 8 is negative 14 over 2, which is negative 7. So we've got x equals 1, x equals negative 7 as the solutions or the intercepts. When I say the solution, what I really mean is that's where the intercept is for this graph. Now let's take a look at what the graph looks like. Let's copy the equation down. We get x squared plus 6x minus 7. Okay. Now remember, to find the vertex, we start with negative b over 2a. So negative b would be negative 6 over 2 times 1, which is 2. So negative 3 is the value for x. And we're going to take negative 3 and plug it back into the original equation. So we get 3 squared plus 6 times 3 minus 7 is 9 plus 18 minus 7. So y is going to be 27 minus 7. Let's see. Is this right? 9 minus, whoops. That's a minus there. Right? Because it's minus 3. Minus 18. So 9 minus 18 is negative 9, minus 7 is negative 16. Now let me rewrite that. 3 squared plus 6 times negative 3 minus 7 equals 9 minus 18 minus 7 equals negative 16. All right, let's just get rid of that little debacle. So the vertex is negative 3 comma negative 16. And the two x-intercepts are 1 and negative 7. So here's negative 7, here's 1, and we'll make this negative 3. So negative 3, right. Negative 3 over here. Negative 3. Well, this is negative 16, I believe. Right. So this is going to look something like this. And right here is the vertex. Negative 3 comma negative 16. So that's what that graph looks like. We all get confused now and again. I think it's old age. I hope not. All right, let's move on to the next one. Here's a good problem. X squared plus 8x minus 9. X squared plus 8x minus 9, we know that A equals 1, B equals 8, and C equals negative 9. Our quadratic formula, which we write out every time, is negative B plus or minus the square root of B squared minus 4AC, all over 2A. And negative B would be negative 8, plus or minus the square root of, well, 8 squared is 64. Minus 4 times 1 times negative 9, all over 2 times 1. So that gives us negative 8 plus or minus the square root of 64. Well, 9 times 4 is 36, so negative 9 times 4 is negative 36. So we have 64 minus negative 36. So it's 64 plus 36. That makes it easy, all over 2. So that's going to give us negative 8 plus or minus the square root of 100 over 2. So we've got negative 8 plus or minus 10 over 2. So we're going to have, well, let's see, negative 8 plus 10 is 2 over 2, which is equal to 1. And negative 8 minus 10 is negative 18 over 2, which is negative 9. So now let's graph this and see where the vertex is. Let me recopy the equation. X squared plus 8x minus 9 equals 0. Get rid of this. Now, we know that the intercepts are x equal to 1 and x equal to negative 9. We know that negative b over 2a is going to give us the x value for the vertex. So negative b would be negative 8 over 2 times 1, which is 2, so negative 4. And our y value, let's plug it in. Negative 4 squared plus 8 times negative 4 minus 9 is equal to 16 minus 32 minus 9. So that's negative 16 minus 9 is negative 25. So our vertex is negative 4 comma negative 25. So let's draw a little Cartesian coordinate plane. We know that we have intercepts at negative 9 and 1. And we know that negative 4 and negative 25 is where the vertex is. So that's what our graph looks like. Right here, that point is negative 4, negative 25. That's the vertex. And we found the two intercepts, 1 and negative 9, using the quadratic formula. Another problem solved. All right. Let's see what's up next. Actually, I'm going to get a drink here. That hit the spot. Let me just get another. Needed that. Okay. Well, let's see what's up next. X squared minus 10x minus 22 equals 0. So we know that A equals 1, B equals negative 10, C equals negative 22. And our quadratic formula is negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Well, negative b would be negative 10, so we're looking at 10 plus or minus the square root of, well, negative 10 squared is 100 minus 4 times 1 times negative 22 over 2 times 1. So 10 plus or minus the square root of 100. Well, let's see. Negative 22 times 4 is negative 88. So negative 88, 100 minus negative 88 is 100 plus 88. All over 2. And that gives us 10. Plus or minus the square root of 188 all over 2. Well, most people wouldn't know this off the top of their head, and I didn't either. But 188 is equal to the square root of 47 times 4. So it's equal to 2 times the square root of 47. So we have 10 plus or minus the square root, 2 times the square root of 47, all over 2. We can factor out a 2 from the numerator. 2 times 10 plus or minus 2 root 47. No 2 there, sorry, little mistake. All over 2. The 2's cancel, and we're left with 10 plus or minus the square root of 47. That's not 10, that's another error, that's 5. No, I'm sorry, that's 10, I was right. No, it's 5. What a goofball. I should have, when I factored out the 2 here, I should have factored out and got 5 there. So it's 5 plus or minus the square root of 47. So x is equal to 5 plus square root of 47, and x is equal to 5 minus square root of 47. So now let's take a look at where the vertex is. So we've got x squared minus 10x minus 22 equals 0. And we know that the two values for the intercepts are x equal 5 plus the square root of 47, x equals 5 minus the square root of 47. And actually, if you work those out, they work out to be about 11.86. And I'm going to put about, and about negative 1.86. Now the vertex is negative b over 2a, which is 10 over 2, which is 5, and that's for x. Now if we plug 5 back into the original equation, we'll get our value for y. So y is equal to 5 squared minus 10 times 5 minus 22, which is 25 minus 50 minus 22. And let's see, 25 minus 50 is negative 25, minus 22 is negative 47. So y equals negative 47. So the vertex is 5 comma negative 47. So let's draw this graph. We're at about negative 1.86 and about 11.86, and 5 is the vertex, x equal 5 and y equal negative 47. So right about here, it's obviously not in proportion. So that's what the graph is going to look like. The two intercepts at negative 1.86 and 11.86, and the vertex at 5, negative 47. And we're finished with this problem. Let's see what we've got next. Okay. Oh, this looks relatively easy. X squared minus 4x plus 9 equals 0. So we know that A equals 1, B equals negative 4, C equals 9, and our quadratic formula is negative B plus or minus the square root of B squared minus 4AC over 2A. Negative B would be negative 4, which would be plus 4. So 4 plus or minus the square root of, well, let's see, negative 4 squared is 16. Minus 4 times 1 times 9. All over 2 times 1. So we get 4 plus or minus the square root of 16. Well, here we go. 16 minus 9 times 4 is 36, so it's 16 minus 36, all over 2. As you can see, we're going to be negative under the radican. In fact, we're going to be negative 20 under there. So we have 4 plus or minus the square root of negative 20 all over 2. Well, this poses a little problem, but we'll deal with it. So negative 20 is equal to the square root of negative 5 times the square root of 4, which is going to be equal to 2 times the square root of negative 5. So let's get that written up here. We have 4 plus or minus 2 times the square root of negative 5 all over 2. We can factor out a 2 from the numerator, so we get 2 times 2 plus or minus square root of negative 5 all over 2. And the 2's cancel, and that gives us 2 plus or minus the square root of negative 5. Now, that's your answer. But we want to write this in a different form. Now remember, this is going to be, or it is a complex answer here because of the square root of negative 5. The square root of negative 5 can be written as the square root of negative 1 times the square root of 5. And the square root of negative 1 is equal to I. So this solution is 2 plus or minus the square root of 5I, which is in A plus or minus BI form, which is the way we write a complex number. So this is 2 plus the square root of 5I equal x, and 2 minus the square root of 5I equal to x. Those are your two x values, okay? And I'm going to leave this problem right there. Okay. let's move on. And we've got, how about x squared plus 8x plus 7? Equals 0. A equals 1, B equals 8, C equals 7. We have negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Negative b is negative 8 plus or minus the square root of, well, b squared is 8 squared, which is 64, minus 4 times 1 times 7 all over 2 times 1. So we have negative 8 plus or minus the square root. Let me move this up a little. The square root of 64 minus 28 all over 2. And if we do that, we get negative 8 plus or minus the square root of 36 all over 2. That makes it easy. So we get negative 8 plus or minus 6 over 2. So negative 8 plus 6 is 2 over 2, which is equal to 1 for x. And negative 8 minus 6 is negative 14 over 2, which is negative 7 for x. I made a mistake here. Negative 8 plus 6 is negative 2. So this should be negative 1. Okay. Let's graph. So we get x equals negative 1 and x equals negative 7. That's where the graph intersects the x-axis. So let's graph this thing. We have x squared plus 8x plus 7 equals 0. And the intercepts are x equals negative 1 and x equals negative 7. The vertex, well, for x is negative b over 2a, so it's negative 8 over 2, which is negative 4. And for the y value, y is going to be equal to 4 squared, negative 4 squared, plus 8 times negative 4 plus 7 is 16 minus 32 plus 7. And I believe, let's see, so negative 16 plus 7 is negative 9. So the vertex is negative 4, negative 9. So now we can graph this thing. We've got all the major points. So we have negative 9 and we have negative 4. And the vertex, oh, this should be negative 1, sorry. And the vertex is negative 4. And the y value is negative 9. So we're looking something like this. Whoop. Let me redraw that. Even with my poor drawing skills, that's bad. Let me put that out a little bit. Negative 9, negative 1, negative 4, boom, negative 7, negative 9. So right here, there's your graph of x squared plus 8x plus 7 equals 0. All right, let's move on. Let's see what we have here. Okay, let's make this the last one. X squared plus 10x plus 9 equals 0. All right, so A equals 1, B equals 10, and C equals 9. We have negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. Negative b is negative 10 plus or minus the square root of, well, b squared is 10 squared is 100 minus 4 times 1 times 9 all over 2 times 1. So we've got negative 10 plus or minus the square root of 100 minus 36 all over 2, which gives us negative 10 plus or minus the square root of 64. That makes it easy, over 2. So we have negative 10 plus or minus 8 over the square root of 2. So negative 10 plus 8 is negative 2 over 2, which is negative 1. And negative 10 minus 8 is negative 18 over 2, which is negative 9. So we have x equals negative 1 and x equals negative 9 as the two intercepts. So let's get to the graph of this thing. So let's copy this down. X squared plus 10x plus 9 equals 0. So we know that our two intercepts are x equals negative 1 and x equals negative 9. And now we want the vertex. So we're going to start with negative b over 2a, which is negative 10 over 2, which is negative 5. And that's for x. Now let's get our y value. Y is going to be equal to negative 5 squared plus 10 times negative 5 plus 9 is 25 minus 50 plus 9 is negative 25 plus 9, I believe, is negative 16. So y equals negative 16. So the vertex is negative 5 comma negative 16. So let's draw it. So we have negative 1 and negative 9, negative 9, negative 1, and negative 5, and negative 16. So this point is negative 5 comma negative 16. And that's our graph, and that's our last one for this video. Once again, this is Professor Charles Kaplan, retired. Wishing you and your families all the best. Have a great day. Hope this helped. If it helped, let me know. I'd appreciate it.